Isaac. The Smile of God, Part 2. The well of strife years folded in upon themselves like the layers of cloth in a nomad's tent. Isaac's youthful laughter had deepened, gaining soft lines around the eyes, not just from age, but from a quiet, pondered joy. Abraham had departed, gathered to his people in a cave at Machpelah that echoed with promises. Isaac had buried his father with solemn grief, feeling the weight of the patriarchal mantle settle upon his own shoulders. The promise was now his to steward, to incubate, to protect. And with it came famine. It was not a sudden hunger, but a slow, persistent scarcity that descended upon Cuanon like a silent curse. The rain ceased. The land, once generous, became a cracked crust under a merciless sun. The pastures withered to a sickly brown. The wells Abraham had dug symbols of his provision, and right began to spit sand instead of water. The laughter in Isaac's name seemed an ironic echo amidst the crackling drought. Rebekah, his wife, his well of living water in the human desert, placed a gentle hand on his tense arm one night. Her face, lit by a clay lamp, was marked with concern. "The women whisper at the dry wells, Isaac," she said. "They say we must go to Egypt, as your father did." Isaac looked at the dancing flames. Egypt, land of deceptive abundance, where his father had almost lost his mother to a covetous pharaoh, where security was bought at the price of dependence. A voice within him, a voice he had learned to hear on the hill of consecration, whispered a soft but firm denial. "No, Rebekah," he said, his voice calm but laden with the tension of one holding a rope over an abyss. "The Lord has told me to dwell in this land. He will be with me and will bless me here." Even in the drought, Rebekah did not argue. His trust in that invisible voice was the pillar that upheld her world. She merely nodded, her gaze saying what words could not. "I am with you." The next day, Isaac gathered his most faithful servants and gave the order that seemed insane to many. They would dismantle the tents and move, not south toward the generous Nile, but west toward the land of the Philistines and the city of Gerar. It was not a flight, but a tactical move, a remaining within the bounds of the promise. Isaac's obedience was not passive. It was an aggressive act of faith, a planting of his feet in the dry earth, and a declaration, "My God will provide." Gerar was a city of shadows and stone, ruled by a sharp-eyed Philistine king named Abimelech. The arrival of Isaac with his vast entourage, hundreds of servants, herds bellowing with thirst, camels creaking with weariness, caused a tremor of distrust. A Hebrew nomad with such wealth in times of famine was a dangerous anomaly. Tension hung in the air, drier than the dust. Isaac then made a decision that would have made his father turn in his grave at Machpelah. He instructed Rebekah to say she was his sister. The ancient fear, the ghost of Egypt, had haunted his judgment. It was a moment of weakness, a crack in the armor of his faith. He protected his life, but compromised his integrity, and worse, placed Rebekah in peril. God, however, the God he knew in the silence, did not abandon him to his own folly. Abimelech, looking from a window of his stone palace, saw Isaac and Rebekah together. He saw the way he touched her, the softness in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. It was the look of a husband, not a brother. It closed. That night, an imposing presence invaded the Philistine king's dreams. "Abimelech, beware. This man is a prophet. His wife is not his sister. To touch her is to bring death upon yourself and your kingdom." Abimelech awoke, drenched in cold sweat, the voice echoing in his bones. At dawn, Isaac was summoned to the palace, expecting a sentence. Instead, he found a shaken and furious king. "What have you done to us?" Abimelech snarled, his authority rattled by supernatural terror. "Any of my people could have taken her, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Who acts this way?" Isaac stood before him, shame burning his face hotter than the desert sun. There were no excuses. His faith had faltered. He had tried to secure the promise with human lies. The voice he had heard on the hill was silent now, but the weight of his own disappointment was crushing. "I was afraid," Isaac confessed, his voice low but clear. "I feared they would kill me on account of her." Abimelech shook his head, a mixture of contempt and a fearful respect for the power that so clearly protected this strange man. "Move on. Stay on the outskirts of our land if you wish, but bring us no more trouble." Humiliated, Isaac departed. He settled in the valley of Gerar, a marginal land. And it was there, in the place of his failure and his shame, that provision began. Not with a bang, but with the soft, persistent sound of a hoe against the earth. He ordered his servants to dig. They reopened the wells his father Abraham had dug, which the Philistines, moved by jealousy and fear, had stopped up with earth after his death. Each unstopped well was an act of redemption, a return to the roots, re-establishment of the inheritance he had nearly lost to fear. The first well gushed fresh, cool water from the depths. The servants shouted for joy. Isaac named it Esek, contention, because the herdsmen of Gerar came immediately, claiming the water is ours. The strife Isaac had tried to avoid with a lie found him anyway, now centered around the gift of God. Isaac did not fight. That earlier Isaac, the protected son, might have felt entitled to fight. But the Isaac who knew the voice of Yahweh Yireh in his spirit simply withdrew. He ordered them to dig another well. Again the earth yielded its precious liquid. Again the Philistines came to contend. He named this one Sitnah enmity, and again he moved away. His faith was being refined in the fire of injustice. He was learning that God's blessing did not need to be defended with human fists. It carved its own path. Finally, they dug a third well. This time, silence. No dispute. No hostile herdsmen appeared on the horizon. The waters ran clear and free. Isaac looked at that flow, a liquid mirror reflecting the open sky above, and a deep, real smiled the smile his name carried lit his face. Now he declared, his voice resonating with a victorious peace, "The Lord has given us room, and we will flourish in the land." He named that well Rehoboth, spaciousness. It was not just a physical spaciousness of pasture land. It was a spaciousness of the soul. It was in the act of yielding, of trusting, of continuing to dig even when others stole the fruits of his labor. Isaac found an entirely new dimension of God. Yahweh Yireh, the provider, was not just the one who gives. He was the one who gives in the right place at the right time, after obedience is tested. The provision came after the humiliation. The abundance sprang up after the surrender. The spaciousness was won through restraint. That night, sitting at the entrance of his tent at Rehoboth, watching the stars reflected in the well's tranquil waters, Isaac felt the presence return. Not with a rebuke for his lie in Gerar, but with a silent, powerful affirmation. It was as if God himself were sitting with him, sharing the silence of a quiet victory. "Have you learned, son?" The unspoken voice seemed to whisper in the murmur of the water. "My blessing is not a shield against conflict. It is a seed planted in the soil of obedience, which blooms even when trampled. You did not inherit only your father's promise. You inherited my character. I am slow to anger, abounding in love. You yielded the well, but you won the heart of a nation." Look, Isaac looked toward the camp. The news of his peaceful character, his blessed persistence, had spread. Men from Gerar, curious and impressed, began to approach, exchanging news, offering gifts. Hostility was giving way to cautious respect. The blessing was overflowing the boundaries of his camp, touching those who had once been his adversaries. And then came the voice, clear and unmistakable in the sanctuary of his heart, as on the hill years before. "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and increase your descendants because of my servant Abraham." Tears flooded Isaac's eyes. They were not the tears of adolescent relief, but of a man who had been broken and mended by the divine potter. God had not rejected him for his weakness in Gerar. He had led him through it to a place of deeper dependence. The covenant was renewed, not on the basis of Isaac's perfection, but on the unchanging faithfulness of God. He built an altar there at Rehoboth. This time it was not his father who led him, it was his own faith, forged in the valley of humiliation and watered by the waters of strife. And instead of moving on as he had before, he pitched his tents around that altar. God's presence was no longer a destination to be visited, it was the center of his existence, the true well of living waters from which everything else flowed. The period of famine had not yet completely ended. The challenges had not disappeared. But Isaac, the man of the silent smile, now knew something that transformed everything. The true drought is never the lack of rain. It is the lack of trust. And he had drunk deeply from the inexhaustible well of God's faithfulness. He was ready for what came next. For the promise of a starry, numberless offspring still needed an heir. And that would be a well of an entirely different kind, dug in the depths of prayer and human despair. End of part 2. May God bless you and keep you. Subscribe to the channel and receive more videos like this. Thank you for watching until the end.